Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Um, we'll give everyone a few minutes to start trickling in before we kick off. Um, but while we're waiting, if everyone wants to throw in the chat where they're joining in from, get an idea of where everyone's at. Chad, where are you located at?
I'm dialing in from Italy right now, of all
Nice.
places.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm like northwestern Italy, right by Switzerland.
Nice. I can envy that one. I wish I was dialing in from Italy.
Where are you?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. We're definitely in different places in the world right now.
Yeah, pretty opposite corners there.
hmm
Italy has
My
always been
son
one
is
on my bucket list, though.
my son is going to a forest camp here right now.
Okay,
So I'm here for the month.
nice, nice. Hoping to make it out there someday in the near future. That it's mainly the food. That's really why I want to be out there. But
The food is decadent. It's like pizza and pasta. There's not a lot of other things that I've found, at least.
right,
But yeah, it's very decadent, very rich food.
yeah, definitely can't go wrong with pizza or pasta in my mind, though. Cool. Well, it looks like we have a pretty good crowd here, so we can go ahead and jump right into things. Appreciate again everyone for joining us today. Just a quick intro on myself. My name is Kenton. I'm a customer success manager here at IntentWise. For those of you who may not be fully familiar with IntentWise, we are a kind of end-to-end software solution to help support you in your Amazon ads and data journeys. So we have three different apps that we kind of focus on here. So we have an ad optimizer tool that allows you to go in with automated rules, AI bidding systems, and make changes to your day-to-day bidding adjustments based off of recent performance data, based off of data compared to your targets there, as well as some tools built into that platform to help you do some data analysis, whether that be week over week, month over month, things like that. Then we have some data focused tools with including our analytics cloud tool, which helps you formulate all of your data into one place and push it out into a system like Looker Studio or something like that. And then we have our Amazon Marketing Cloud tool, which really aims to take the SQL knowledge off of the end consumer. We take on a lot of that burden that comes with getting insight into Amazon Marketing Cloud, and try to get you guys those insights as quickly as possible, whether you're a brand and agency, helping support you on all three of those fronts. So that's a little bit about me and IntentWise. Chad, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. Chad Rubin. I've been in this space, in the Amazon e-commerce space, for about 20 years. I started my career doing D2C. So we sell vacuum filters, coffee filters, and air filters. I also started a software company called Stubana. We sold that in 2021 of April, and then also co-founded the Prosper Show. We sold that in 2018. Today, I am working on and building, and also have built already, a software called Prophecy. We essentially change pricing in a very Uber style manner. So we match people's people's willingness to buy with the value of your product at different times of the day and during different periods of the day and week and month, etc., based on seasonality, competition, all to maximize profits, revenue, or unit velocity.
Awesome. That's a great intro. I appreciate it, Chad. I think for everyone's context today, see the title. We're talking about pricing, right? So we have a couple things that we're going to kind of walk through. Just best practices around pricing. Pricing after events like we are right now after Prime Day. Different strategies we can take into our pricing models. How to go about, thinking about your pricing. But if at any point anyone has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Keeping this, somewhat of an open style. So if anyone has questions, we're happy to kind of talk through those and answer any burning questions you may have as it revolves around pricing. But yeah, I guess to kind of kick off, Chad, I think what one of the things that I've been thinking through as we've been talking about pricing is it seems like it's a less discussed topic than a lot of other things in this kind of Amazon e-commerce space. We talk about ads a lot. We even talk about like creatives and content a lot. And there's some things around pricing, especially around events like Prime Day, which we just had. But outside of those, promotional periods, it seems like pricing isn't very discussed. Do you have any insight into why it might not be as pressing of a topic?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one is Amazon incentivizes the behavior that they want brands to achieve. And they do this in a lot of different ways. But the first way that they do this is Amazon makes money on PPC. And so then Amazon creates a PPC community where there's agencies and softwares that are part of that. And so everyone kind of has been focusing on PPC for a very long. And by the way, I'm not saying PPC isn't great. Just like PPC is amazing, right? It's 50% of a company's revenue. You have to pay to play on Amazon these days. But I think that there's like sort of this like sleight of hand where it's like, hey, this is happening over here, but then there's this all this part that we kind of forget to focus on, and that's on price. And so price is the biggest lever you can possibly pull on Amazon, and all of that flows to the bottom line. The problem is actually it's really easy to talk about pricing and hard to actually execute. But back to your question, I think the biggest thing on Amazon is like there's essentially a lot of decisions made of fear. There's misinformation. There's decisions that are made in fear on Amazon. Now, that fear sometimes comes from the right place, like suppression concerns on their listing. And I think the last piece is really just inattention. There's only so much time in the day, and so brands aren't spending a lot of time thinking about pricing.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. I think it's just kind of not as big of a priority, which maybe it should be, and maybe as we talk through things today, it can become more of a priority for some of these brands. I'm sure the difference in a couple of dollars could drastically change your conversion rate, drastically change your margin on a couple of different products, even if it doesn't seem like a huge difference to that end consumer.
I think like most things in life, a lot of the opportunity comes in the fringes. And so when you think about pricing, only these small levers swing big doors. So when you can find pennies in the couch cushion, those add up over time, especially on a high velocity product. So there's a Harvard business study that was done, and it says pretty much a change in a 1% increase in price can yield a 14% increase in operating profit. And that's just to start. The reason why I think on Amazon pricing is so complex is that there's something that brands experience, which is what I call a knock-on effect, a second order of consequence, because you can change price, but there's a consequence for changing price, and that is your ranking position can change. So it's hard to figure out, should I go up in price or should I go down in price, and what is the optimal price based on the time of the day or the period that you're in as a seller specifically, or based on what happens with the competitor. And this is why, to me, I've solved this problem specifically with AI and machine learning, which looks at patterns and gets smarter over time. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but essentially, this is why pricing on Amazon is so difficult.
Totally. And I guess kind of on that front, right? If I wanted to say, hey, I recognize pricing is important, maybe as an area where if I'm looking for opportunities for my business, right, where, in the e-commerce space, we're always looking, what can we be testing? What can we try something new on? And so if I'm deciding, hey, I want to focus on my pricing, really hone that in, how would you typically go about the start of that process? If I decided, hey, I want to really hone in on optimizing my pricing, what does that initial phase kind of look like?
Yeah. So, and that, by the way, I have an e-com business. So like I actually started doing this manually. So I was trying to take advice from all the gurus and all the people on Amazon of what to do, and it wasn't yielding the kind of results that I figured. And now I have 550 private label products on Amazon today. And so I started actually going in and changing price myself. So I was like, okay, for this ASIN, what do I want to achieve? What's my goal? Okay, I want to profit maximize. Great. So now on a daily basis, I would go in and really start looking at all the data inside my account. So I would look at my BSR. I would look at what it was this today versus the previous year and what that change has been. Units sold as a signal, obviously price and the previous price, revenue and ad spend and ACoS. Like I put this all into a spreadsheet, my cost of goods sold before ad expense, and then profit. And so then I started looking at competitors and pulling their pricing in and their BSR to understand what their top of share is as well. And I started pulling in from Helium 10 revenue and units sold metrics. Started building a framework around this and started seeing some pretty amazing results, and letting the results dictate what the next decision should be. And that is where you really want to start, is looking at the data for one specific ASIN and understanding your intention. Because like sometimes your intention you might not want to profit maximize. Maybe you want to BSR maximize. Maybe you want to increase velocity. Whatever that is that you want to do, start adjusting price. And they don't have to be big price increases. or decreases for that matter. They can be very small changes to price. And so I want to set the record straight that number one is when you change price, your rank will not plummet if it's conscious and smart price adjustments. If you're just like, hey, willy-nilly, I'm going to increase price 20%, that is, I would say, like a bad approach. And so you need to actually equip yourself with knowledge to make these data-driven decisions, and so you can do it without fear.
Totally. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's key that you just called that out, right? We're not looking at 20, 25% price swings here. We're looking at those things on the margins, like you mentioned earlier. I think that's key for everyone to keep in mind that maybe that couple percent change does make a change in your conversion rate, does make a change in your overall margin here, and at the end consumer point doesn't have as big of that impact. I think it's really similar to the way we think about a lot of other things that we're testing on Amazon, whether it's, advertising, right? We go into it, hey, how can we use advertising to affect our organic ranking, right? Well, that's a lot of those same data points, how is our BSR changing? How is our organic rankings changing over time as we put more ad dollars here? Now, do we need to pull back because this product's doing really good organically and we'll focus on another one that's struggling organically? It's a lot of that same rotation that we might see there, or even with creatives, right? It's pulling on all these different data points. How's my CTR changing? How's my conversion rate changing? Am I seeing that CTR conversion rate affect my rankings? So, I think if people are familiar with those processes and some of those other fields that are pretty, heightened or aware of in this e-commerce space, I'm sure a lot of that kind of transfers over to the pricing space as well.
Yeah, 1,000%. It all transfers over for sure. One thing I think I probably forgot to mention is that when you think about the Amazon marketplace, it's a lot like Wall Street. There's a lot of parallels in the trading markets and the Amazon marketplace. They're all widgets and they're all commodities to some degree. And so I would argue that neither of these markets are actually completely efficient. And so consumers on the buying side don't process price changes perfectly. In fact, they don't process listings perfectly. And that's why people are always testing. And so that's really why the Amazon marketplace is actually not perfectly efficient. And that's essentially what we do, which is we apply an AI-driven dynamic pricing approach on Amazon to exploit the market inefficiencies for financial gain. Very similar to like what Uber does or Lyft, if you're familiar, or even like Expedia or Airbnb. All of them have smart pricing. We're doing the same thing, but just making that available for Amazon brands.
Totally, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think something I've always come back to, right, is you see all these major brands that have done all this product market research, right, and they're determining that smart pricing is the right way to go. We probably should just take that note from them and apply it. Skip the not fully skip the research phase, but they've done a lot of that heavy lifting to determine that consumers are okay with that smart pricing dynamic. So where we can kind of take that learning and find ways to implement it ourselves. So I guess, Chad, from your perspective, right, once I have all that data, I've started to collect it, I'm looking at things, what does that kind of optimization cycle start to look like? Like, am I looking at this daily? Am I looking at this weekly? Am I, adjusting 5%? Am I adjusting 10%? How do you start to go about that?
Yeah, you just have to make small price. I would just start increasing in a small level. Now, some people like psychological pricing. So if let's just say you're $25 and $25.25. You're not going to be at $25.03, for example. Some people don't want to be at that psychological price point. So you want to go to either round up or go to the nearest 39 or 49 or 59 cent mark, et cetera. But small incremental changes. We're talking about, it could be, if it's a $20 product, it could be 20 cents or 30 cents here or there. The challenging thing, like I mentioned earlier, is that sometimes the optimal decision is to go up in price, but sometimes the optimal decision is to go down in price. So if you lower price, you have the ability to sell more units, right? And by selling more units, also obviously a lower price means you increase demand, and also there in fact increases your conversion rate for that product. So now you're selling more units, you're making it's less on an average selling price basis, but you're making more profit on a unit basis because you're selling more units. And now you're essentially increasing your rank on top of that, getting you to a higher ranking position on Amazon, which means that you don't have to rent space paying for ads either. So you have to figure out what's happening in the marketplace, where are consumers biting? Where are you matching the willingness of them to buy with the value of your product and making that together? And also, you have to also take into account what your competitors do. And then on top of that, if Amazon likes what you're doing or doesn't like what you're doing.
Totally. That makes
So
a lot
you
of
have to
sense.
just so for me, it would be like with this spreadsheet that I've built. And by the way, I'm happy to give it to people that are listening. If you email me at chad@prophecy.com, I can give you a pretty substantial price optimization framework that we built. It's a template that I'm happy to share with you of how I was doing this manually and how you can use these same inputs to do it manually as well.
That's awesome. I appreciate that, Chad. Everyone definitely should reach out and get that. Even if you're just wanting to start thinking about pricing, or you're ready to fully jump in and start making pricing a priority, you can never have too many of those resources. So that's super valuable. I know you mentioned a couple different levers we might look at there, right? Maybe we're looking at BSR, maybe we're looking at organic rank, or just our total units sold. From what you've seen from the clients that you work with, from doing this with your own brands, is there any other of those main metrics that people usually look at? And of those, is there any like one or two in particular that you see the main, most people hone in on?
So you're breaking up a little bit, Kenton, but I think what I gathered was there's a lot of data to extrapolate, and which one should you be honing in on to make sure you're making the right decision? So I think if you're trying to maximize profit, the one thing you don't want to do is sacrifice your ranking position. And so if you look at your hero keywords and understand your rank for those hero keywords, you also understand your BSR as a proxy for discoverability on Amazon. That is something I would be taking a look at along with unit velocity, obviously overall profit contribution of the ASIN. Now, I think where it gets interesting, and you're very close in the ad space, is when you harmonize and unify price and advertising together. We've seen this to be a massive, massive unlock. So if you walk through an example, for example, a garlic press, let's just say the garlic press is at $25. If you increase the price by 20% to $30, and you do this over time, and you increase your ACOS from 20% to 25%, which is also, I believe, a 20% increase, what happens is your contribution profit doubles. So your ROAS and your ACOS look worse, but your profit on your ad spend, your POAS, looks a lot better. And I think that's the one thing that people aren't doing. Essentially, when you're optimizing using a software or using an ad agency, you're only optimizing the numerator, which is your ad spend. You're not optimizing the denominator, which is your revenue, which is price times units. And when you do that together harmoniously, the outcome could be non-linear in terms of your contribution profit dollars that are extracted based on those changes.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it comes back to a lot of what we see in some other similar fields. Like if we're talking about like refund cases, which I know has become a big thing over the last couple of years, we're trying to get that refund money back from Amazon. And a big use case of that I've seen is, hey, now you have more money you can put back into your ads, and this is almost like you're playing with ad credits at this point, right? You can test, you can learn new things. It doesn't have to have that ACOS focus, and so this kind of unlocks a similar thing here, right? Well, maybe it's still, we have an ACOS focus here. It allows you to expand into maybe some more aggressive non-branded terms because you have that additional margin there, which overall continues to fuel that flywheel, right? Where now, because I've focused on more of these non-branded terms, my rank should be improving in there. I'm getting more organic sales, so I'm sure it becomes a cycle almost.
Precisely.
Yeah. So one question we got from the chat that I wanted to ask you about: have you noticed anything, kind of going back to that like psychological pricing, right? So if I'm looking at a pricing versus say I'm at 1949, have you seen any like detrimental effects if I go up to like a 2049 versus 1999, kind of changing what that first digit is? And I'm sure that could apply at 79 versus $80. Have you noticed anything there?
Yeah. So we've built charm pricing into our model. So like when people see a 2301, for example, they don't like that. So we have built that into our model. And certainly if you're doing this, if you're listening right now and you're doing this yourself, you can be applying your own psychological pricing to your proxy and also see the impact yourself. So in that spreadsheet that I was referring to, that feel free to email me about at Chad@Prophecy, you could plug that in and see what the impact is, right? So I think there's a lot of people that certainly have not sold on Amazon for a very long time that are giving recommendations right now. Even some agencies that have or closed their e-com brand and are just strictly an agency, um, you'll hear advice that's sort of not in line with your thinking, and I think that's a result of the fact that you just haven't done it for a long time. And so what I suggest, instead of me trying to tell you what to do, is to let the data drive your decision-making process. When you see the data in the spreadsheet and you start seeing what's happening, what are your competitors doing? What is the threshold that Amazon's suppressing your listing at? Do more people buy during this month at this specific price than what was happening a year ago at the same time, and also last month at the same time? And taking all of this into account is what should be driving your decisioning process.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think it's similar. Like we've talked about, all this is very similar across these different fields. If you're making ad changes, you're really just honing on what that data tells you. If you're making creative changes, honing on what that data is telling you, because none of this is that one size fits all solution, right? Maybe for one person, going to $19 to $20 makes a large impact just because of the category they're in. Maybe everyone else is under $20, or versus maybe you're in a category where everyone starts at like $21, and going up to that $20 makes less of an impact because it's not as it's pretty concise with what your category is seeing. So definitely seems like there's a lot of those differences that kind of have to be evaluated on a brand per brand basis.
And so, like, let's just say you start increasing your ad spend. No, so let's say you're harmonizing price and advertising dollars together. There's actually a great table on our website that kind of shows this, but you can increase price and then offset that by increasing your ad spend, but not as much as you're increasing price. And there's a lot of sellers that I'm seeing doing this right now. Even in the garlic, if you type in garlic press right now into Amazon in the top of search, you'll see this third ranked sponsored company selling a garlic press for $29.99, while everybody else is at $12.99, $14.99, $17.54. And that is a result of them saying, hey, you know what? We've done the math and we understand that at this higher price point with such high margins, we have more room to operate, to spend more for advertising to get to be top of search. And that's precisely what this company Gia's strategy is on top of search at Amazon right now. And so we're doing this with other sellers. We're working in tandem with other PPC agencies and softwares like yourself to really harmonize price, because pricing dictates ad spend. So if our model knows where pricing is going next week, we know where ad spend should go at a specific price point to maximize your intention. If that intention is profit, we know exactly how much you should be putting your spend to for that specific ASIN to unlock profit dollars for the business.
Totally, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's allows you to prepare, right? So we prepare, like you mentioned, prepare our ad spend, prepare even a different ad strategy, right? If we know maybe we're going to be allowed to put more in this non-branded tactic or something like that we want to test. So I think it's definitely comes back to having that holistic view, having that good data management, which is definitely in line with a lot of what we're doing as well. Another question we got from the chat, it's kind of going back to the ranking idea. So how does ranking play into pricing? So say I'm at a really high rank. I'm the second organic ranker. How would you take that and change your price based off of that? And then if you started to see that rank slip after a pricing change or a strategy change in your ads, and now you're at the 10th to 12th placement, what type of pricing adjustments would you typically see someone make off of that if rank was a key indicator, a key priority for them?
So look, one of the things that we do is we figure out what the elasticity measure is on a specific ASIN at a specific time. So we have the luck of having a data science team and having a software that automatically does this. If you don't have that currently at your disposal, it would go back to that. So if let's just use your example, your garlic press, you're organically ranked number 2 for that garlic press, for the word garlic press. And so I would create a spreadsheet with these signals and say, okay, we're at $12.49 currently. Let's see what happens when we go to $12.62 or $12.65, right? If you're charm pricing. And now you're there and you start seeing, okay, what happened? Did my demand go down? in the case of, or if you're ranked number 2 for garlic press, you're selling at least, let's just say, I'm looking on Zule right now. He's selling 20,000 units currently a month for his garlic press. So think about it, a 20-cent increase, right, on that garlic press is on 20,000. Let's do the numbers. Is $4,000, roughly $4,000 of top line, which doesn't all translate into the bottom line, but a lot of it carries over. And then now I would say, okay, interesting. Like demand hasn't changed. Our ranking is still the same. I might have more dollars now to pump into ad spend. And so now I can ever so slightly increase my ad spend for that high performing keyword to make sure that we're artificially creating demand just in case you're losing some organic demand. And I would keep a close eye on your BSR. And then as I see that things have normalized, I might consider increasing it a little bit more, right, and testing. And so Amazon actually Amazon on the website, they show people. So like I think when we started this, we talked about the fears of Amazon. And so Amazon sets limits on how high someone's price can go. Because if your prices are too high, what does Amazon do? They suppress the buy box. So you temporarily lose the buy box. But one idea is that Amazon looks at suppressing your buy box in a 7-day window. So they look at your average selling price for the past 7 days. And as you're starting to increase price ever so slightly, it starts normalizing into that 7-day running average. And so that starts to increase your threshold on Amazon. And that's a really interesting strategy that we use and our model uses when we're changing pricing for private label brands.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, there's all these different cues, right, that we could be taking into account, whether it's rank, whether it's making sure we're not getting suppressed. We don't obviously want to run into that. And another one that I've had come to mind is like inventory. Obviously, that's playing a big effect here, I'm sure. Like, how do I change my pricing if I know I might be running into an inventory issue soon? Like, I'm at a really high velocity, but now I'm at a low weeks on hand. I'm going to have another month before I get my next shipment. How would you approach a situation like that?
Yeah, well, so our model automatically adjusts. So if you're starting to run low on stock, our model will start to slowly increase price to maximize your margin on those products. And conversely, if you're starting to get long-term storage fees, our model will start to offset and lower price to get that out of Amazon's distribution center. So our model takes that into account. Now, if you're doing this manually, look, I think if you're doing this manually, here's what you need to do. You need to set up a team internally that's focusing on price, the same way you have a team that's focusing on advertising. And that team pricing, you're connecting the dots across teams. So price impacts PPC, price impacts your inventory, and price touches all parts of the org. And so all parts of the org must touch pricing. And so you start implementing price discussions and opportunities into your team meetings and giving pricing a bigger seat at the table. And pricing affects your P&L, pricing affects your inventory when you're ordering for purchase orders, pricing affects your advertising, affects everything. So creating a seat for it at the table and building a muscle around this is, to me, one of the most important things that you're doing. This is just like, to me, table stakes right now on Amazon, and really just basics that most people are failing on because they're so focused on like keyword discovery, building out new products and innovating on new products, and so focused on PPC because that's sort of what like everyone is talking about. And so just again, I'm trying to open up the perception here that, hey, pricing is a massive lever. You don't need to spend more on pricing to actually move the needle in your business. And it's a strategy that Zule is using. Like they use pricing as a massive lever to move the needle in their business, whether they want to turn on profits or turn on a higher ranking position. Pricing is the lever that they're using. I actually wrote a pretty massive piece on this on LinkedIn that I'm happy to share with people post call. But we analyze how Zule is using pricing to increase their rank and to make sure that they're number one for garlic press.
That's awesome. And I think from what I'm hearing from you, a lot of this just comes back to having that strong data collection process and then having that plan for what you're going to do based off of what those data points are telling you, which, comes back to what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve with your pricing adjustments? And that can be a goal that changes over time, like you just mentioned. Sometimes it might be profit, sometimes it might be rank, sometimes it might just be top line sales. And so it's really similar, again, like you mentioned, similar to what you do with creatives, what you do with ads. Going in, having those strong data collection processes, setting those goals before you get into there. So I think that that's all super valuable. Kind of switching gears here, though. I know obviously we just got through Prime Day. Everyone still, I'm sure, has their mind really on Prime Day. So when it comes to events specifically, right, how do you think about pricing differently during an event period? I know just from a consumer perspective, when I've been online over the last couple of days, I've seen a lot of people talking about, oh, all these brands are raising their pricing and then couponing it down, or and that can create a negative perception. But obviously, you need to maintain some level of margin. How do you balance those different things when it comes to these event periods?
Yeah, so if an event is coming up, and so let's just say someone's like, "Hey, I'm running a Prime Day deal, and I need to be it has to be 30% the lowest price in the past 30 days and 30% under the most recent price." So that brand will come to us and will essentially set their floor price to be 30% above what their Prime Day deal needs to be. And so it limits perhaps the upside, but our model stays within the boundaries of the person sets up on our platform. So we know in advance they set that up as the floor, and then during Prime Day we freeze any price changes during this time for the 2 days, and then of course go back to pricing thereafter after Prime Day. Now I would say that like a lot of the brands that I've spoken to this year have been a lot less aggressive during Prime Day. Because if you think about it, you're losing 30% of the retail price that you typically sell for. That's on top of the 55% take that Amazon takes, if you include all the fees that Amazon takes. So it's actually quite unsustainable. And most of the time, and I know I'm doing this all the time, is that like I saved a cart and I had a massive cart built here in Italy. I saved my cart just until Prime Day happened. So essentially Prime Day just pulled those deals forward at a much lower margin for those brands. And it was a one-time purchase. It wasn't a repeat purchase. It wasn't for me to discover the brand and to buy a different product from that brand over time. It was simply me buying commodities. And I just did it because Prime Day was the time to do it. And those, by the way, that didn't have a Prime Day deal, I still bought them.
Right, right, because you were going to buy them either way. You were just seeing if you could get that discounted. That makes a lot of sense. And we know the consumer is smart. I'm sure a lot of people are doing this. This is why we see that Prime Day sales are massively up from what we're seeing initially year over year, and obviously in comparison to what we see on an average day. So that makes a lot of sense. I guess so maybe in Prime Day it doesn't make as much sense, especially since we're seeing things like increased ad costs, all of that. But if I was a brand and say I'm having my own promotional period, right? I've seen a lot of brands do this before, where it's like, hey, this week we're going to put all our products on promo, especially if you have a little bit more of an established presence to where you can push that messaging. How would you go about thinking about promos outside of the large Amazon events like a Prime Day or a BFCM?
Yeah, so we price at the retail price before the coupon takes into account. So like our model is consuming the coupon. The coupon is great because you get a click-through rate, right? You're getting like the little orange tag. It sort of creates some urgency in the purchase. So we suggest, hey, keep your coupon running and letting us change price because the coupon is off of the list price. And so we're adjusting the list price and we're adjusting your B2B price as well. And also to make sure that you get strike-through pricing on top of it. So we're constantly testing to figure out, okay, can we get a higher strike-through price so that it looks like they're even getting effectively more of a discount? Now there is some stuff you can do, like for example, I'll share my screen. I think this is a fun one. I'm kind of going off script here, but if you look at Claude, are you familiar with Claude at all as an AI tool?
Yeah.
So Claude is like ChatGPT for those that are listening. And so this was an interesting thing. I played around with this yesterday. So I was buying an office chair and I was like, I want to see if there's like a Herman Miller copycat. So I looked up their prices, and you can see that there's this candlestick pricing that's happening. So they're going to the floor, and the floor is always the same floor. So this company definitely knows, and this is like, so this is the regular price, and then this is their say their bottom price that they're willing to go down. And if you look at this, the green is their ranking, and you can see that every time they drop price in a dramatic way, in a candlestick fashion, their BSR drops with it. So I was like, okay, this is a super interesting study. I'm going to load that one, but I'm also going to take the unit velocity and revenue of this product and plot it with this and throw it into Claude just to see what Claude does, because I really like Claude's reasoning skills. So I said here, you're a data analyst. You are, I guess I spelled it wrong, fine, but you're doing a data analysis. I think Claude got the point with godlike reasoning and a profound pricing data science with technical knowledge, fine. Your job is to help me interpret this e-commerce product pricing graph, right? And essentially it starts analyzing what's happening with this product, right? It said, hey, the buy box fluctuated, or the pink line is fluctuating, fine, the prices. There's frequent price changes. The BSR shows a correlation with the price. So, and where does the BSR go to? And their sales volume. So essentially it's doing some really interesting analysis. These are things that you could be doing on your own products as well, right? You can essentially be creating graphs just like this and seeing once after the fact, of course. So this is a lagging indicator, but seeing if your price changes are actually working when you're making those changes.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate that insight, Chad. I think, we all see AI as a helpful tool. Everyone's always looking for those additional opportunities where they can plug in AI. So that's super beneficial. If it comes to creating those charts, right, how would you typically go about producing that type of data? Would you just, based off of the information where you might be pulling in otherwise for your own analysis, to create some sheets, some charts in like an Excel or something like that? Or is there a specific resource that you found helpful?
So you can use the spreadsheet. You can upload the CSV that I created where you email me. You can use that and upload the data as you're pulling it in on a daily basis. You can upload that into Claude. Of course, it comes down to the prompt that you're using and making sure it's stellar. You can also create those charts that I just showed using like a Keepa if you want to look at your previous pricing strategies that you've employed and see how that impacts rank and your velocity and your revenue. All of that can be thrown into Claude as well, or ChatGPT for that matter, for analysis. But again, it comes down to the prompt that you're creating with that. But so for me, for specifically, it's a lot of work to do that spreadsheet that I'm talking about. I'm not going to lie. Like I have a lot of products, I have a lot of competition, and like understanding what the optimal decision is just, it's very arduous and manual for a brand to do this themselves, unless you have maybe one or two SKUs, right? And so what you really want, and which is really where I've been so focused, is I've been building an algorithm, right, that helped me improve my operating margins by 10 to 15%. And the beautiful thing about it is that with every decision that an algorithm makes, now this is true AI, right? We're not talking about, a lot of companies just claim that they're AI, but it's really just rule-based, duct tape spreadsheets together. But real AI gets smarter over time and is capable of self-improvement. So if the model makes a decision and it's not the right decision, it actually corrects that decision on the following day and learns from that. And so it evolves, it learns, it experiments, all independent of me as the and my company as the human creators of this.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess from that, are you, when you're thinking about things happening automatically, are you bringing in all those other key points you mentioned, like looking at rank, looking at BSR, looking at ad spend? Is that all kind of calculated into that type of equation?
Yeah, so we collect millions of data points on every single transaction. So when you connect to Prophecy, I'll just give you how we do it, right? So we ingest the data. So we ingest it and we enrich it. So we first go back, we go into your Seller Central account, our system does. You connect the API with one click of a button. We go back and we pull all your past sales data, all your sales history for holidays, all the sales trends, your velocity, et cetera. We pull in your sessions, your conversion rate, your ad spend, your click-through rate, your BSR. All of this is pulled into the model. But then on top of this, we go and find your hero keyword. So we do technically what we would call like a reverse ASIN lookup, but better. And we go and find your competitors for a hero keyword and pull in their price point. We pull in 10 competitors. We pull in their reviews. We pull in everything possibly that you can pull in on them. And then we enrich that with data similar to like a Helium 10 or Jungle Scout, right? We pull in revenue and units for their products as well. So all of this is being chewed on by our algorithm, right? And then this data is used to answer important pricing questions and is training the model over time. So then after that, we essentially train the model further because like a lot of these brands never change pricing. And if you never change price, it's like if you went on Facebook or Instagram. If you don't like anything, if you don't follow anybody, if you don't poke anybody, the algorithm for Facebook or Instagram won't know what to serve you. And so it's the same thing for us. We don't know what to serve, what's the right price if we don't change price. So we train the model on historic data, but then we do price testing at scale to train the model in real time and continuously learn from those price changes. And then we deploy that to market to optimize for your specific account. We call it the optimization phase. And so we deploy those learnings to the market, and then we present the results to you. And so our results are based on what you're trying to achieve. So we essentially will try to target and hit what you're trying to achieve in the account for you. And so we're measuring our success by how effective we are for you in terms of velocity, profit, and ranking.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, I think it's again back to that data point, which is in a manual process, like you mentioned, that would be a lot to analyze. It's going to probably you have someone full time doing just that pricing analysis, which may be the right solution for some brands. But I think having that algorithmic way to go about it definitely can make this an easy process for brands to always be testing, similar to what you might be doing with your ads, similar to what you might be doing with your creatives. And I guess the other question I had when it comes to that data point, right? So if I'm making a change to my creatives, I'm testing a new creative batch. I want to see, how is this affecting my CTR or something like that. How would you, if I was running price changes alongside of that, how do you go about taking that into an account if I'm also making changes to other parts of my business that might have a CTR or a conversion rate?
Yeah, we want to have your. I think that's a great question. So thanks for asking it. We want to have your creative stable, right? We don't want you to be moving PPC softwares or agencies at the time that we're taking over. It creates inherent risk, right? And it's harder to measure. So we'd rather actually not take on someone who's going to change their listings, like their copy or their images. That someone we would just say, hey, let's take other. We don't have to take on your whole catalog, by the way. We can take on 5 SKUs. We can take on 10 SKUs. We can take on the middle of the road SKUs versus your top performing SKUs. So we can pick and choose which ASINs and that we want to have under management at Prophecy.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so basically, if I'm anticipating that coming up, let's focus on pricing for ASINs that don't have that coming up, and then as those ASINs stable out, you can revisit that, and it's more keeping things stable during that initial phase, and then maybe if I get longer down the line, I have some of that existing data. I've made a lot of pricing changes. That's when I can start to make some of those other optimizations, which I think is similar to what you would approach on a different level, right? If you wanted to compare how would a main image change versus an A+ content change, how would those differ? Probably not going to do them at the same time because you're not going to know which one had that overall effect. So that makes a lot of sense. Another question I had, just kind of thinking through some other one-off scenarios you might be running into, right? So if I say I'm a CPG brand and I'm trying to focus on subscribe and save sales, or if I'm like an office product and I'm focused on like high volume business sales, do those type of scenarios affect how you go about pricing, or do you use a lot of those same levers to drive those decisions in those spaces?
So our platform is like really robust. So you pick your strategy, whether it's you want to optimize for revenue, profit, BSR, or velocity targets. But then there's a lot of customization. So like you mentioned, subscribe and save. So if you flick this button that says subscribe and save for the profile of the SKU, it limits the upside for the subscribe and save customer, or it limits the amount that we increase price for that specific SKU. Because you're going to have more lifetime value for that SKU over time as the customer's on repeat automatically for that SKU. So there's different strategies you can set up in the system that you can customize for your specific brand in our platform.
Gotcha. Okay, that
Now,
makes a lot of sense.
John, I just want to say, John asked here, how does this programming and products work where brands maintain map pricing across retailers? So, and that's the case. If that's the case, if you have map pricing, there's not a whole lot you can do, right? Map pricing locks you in to one price. You have no maneuverability around price. We've worked with brands that sort of are like, hey, we want to test just going up in price while all of our retailers are remaining lower in price. And so we'll work with them on that test. But at the end of the day, like map pricing does affect your ability to actually have any leverage in your pricing, which kind of sucks. I would say the other thing that's interesting that I've seen, just while we're talking about like channel conflict, and so I'll see like a brand on Amazon. They've been, 99% of their company has been on Amazon for the past 15 years. And suddenly now they're on Target's marketplace. And Target now buys a product from them. And so they sell to Target, and Target buys it and starts selling it. But now Target is stuck with that inventory. And so now your business and your pricing is hijacked by 0.01% of your business that's on Target until Target gets rid of that inventory, or you have to buy it back at a loss. I've seen this now a few times at Prophecy, and so it's a really big dilemma when you start selling across channels and then you lose control of your pricing that you've had control of for the past 15 years.
That makes a lot of sense, right? Because especially on that Amazon front, right, I'm having to, if Target lowers my price, if I want to keep selling on Amazon, I have to kind of find a way to match that, right? So it's something else to take into account. I guess, if you notice issues like that, how do you typically approach that? If, Walmart or Target or someone like that is running a discount on your brand and Amazon's putting you into a suppression because of that?
Well, so typically it doesn't happen where like Target just runs like a deal on a brand, right? It would happen where someone comes to us and then they start spending onto Target and Target buys their product. And like I will always give my input, right? I'm always going to share openly and be like, hey, I think this is a bad decision, right? Like I think that you should just do either dropship vendor with Target, so you control the price, you control the inventory, or you sell on the Target Plus marketplace. And so now you can have much better control about pricing. So maybe you start increasing your price on Target, and then now you have the ability to increase pricing on Amazon. So the Amazon reads that you're at a higher price on another channel, and now you're just getting to price parity, as Amazon would call it. But like if someone's selling on across channel, typically, and there's like such channel conflict across Target, Amazon, Walmart, where they're buying the product, and then there's a discount that's being run, that's a problem, right? Because then there's suppression happening. So we would just match the pricing of what the discount is at the time so that you don't lose rank, so you don't lose the buy box. And then once that discount burns off, then you get back into price control again.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I mean that's all good insight. Before I have one or two more questions I want to ask you, Chad. Before I do, I just want to open it up to anyone in the chat. Feel free to throw your questions in there. I know we've seen a couple, but as we get close to wrapping up here, feel free to throw any questions you might have for Chad in the chat, and we'll make sure to touch on those. But while you guys might be thinking through those, one last question I had, when I'm thinking about it from a consumer perspective, I go online and I'm shopping around for different products. There's different scenarios where I see where sometimes all the variations of a certain product are at this exact same price, but sometimes maybe like an apparel brand, right? The white T-shirt's cheaper than the black T-shirt, which is cheaper than the gray T-shirt, and obviously I'm sure I don't anticipate there'd be a lot of different and cogs there. I haven't done much with an apparel brand before, but I wouldn't anticipate that. Do you have any insight into how you might approach pricing in that scenario where you have a large amount of variations within that same page?
Yeah. So we have groupings in our platform, but like let's use an example because like examples are the best. So in this case, Zule is selling his stainless steel gray garlic press for $12.99. Now, you can see that he has a good amount of variations. And so in our platform, you can actually group the variations together where this one is the parent or the hero and the others are a slave to the price changes. And so you can have them moving together, lockstep, synchronously, or you can break them apart and having them all run independent of each other. In the case of Zule specifically, let's just take a look at what he's doing. So he has his he has his $12.99 garlic press. That's gray. Now let's look at the dark gray. Now there's probably no change to COGS here, right? This dark gray is now $19.99. Let's look at the rose gold. Rose gold coming in at $19.99. So essentially he's using this specific product as it's a loss leader strategy, and then getting customers to come in, and then they pick a different color, perhaps maybe 20 or 25% of those people pick a different color, and then you're essentially making up for that margin and offsetting the loss by selling at such a low price at $12.99.
That makes a lot of sense. So I guess from what you've seen, I'm sure it's not a one size fits all, but you typically recommend brands have that variance in their pricing, taking maybe a slight loss on one product and pushing that one from an advertising perspective.
It depends. So everything on Amazon it depends, right? So for example, if you're selling, let's just say I'm selling this t-shirt, buy low, sell high. I'm selling gray, or I'm selling like small, medium, large, extra large. I might want to have all those prices to be the same and streamlined and moving in lockstep together, all synchronized. So if it's $12.99, then goes to $14.99, then back down to $11.99, and those prices change over time based on demand, based on seasonality, based on a whole lot of other factors, you can do that. Or if you want to do what Zulay is doing, you have a loss leader, you can do that as well for different colors of the same item, because you're essentially just trying to get people to essentially, you're pretty much cross-selling when they get into the listing into a different product or into a different colored product.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think one other kind of, I guess, probably pretty common scenario that I've seen, but one scenario I've run into before, maybe not as related to variance, but more related to like the buy box side of things, which might affect maybe even what you're doing on a variant side of things, right? I know there's some brands that run into issues where they have lots of different channels of sales, and so they have, maybe they're wholesaling in some channels, and those wholesalers are coming on Amazon, and obviously want to avoid that scenario, but maybe the floodgates are already open. How do you approach taking over that buy box pricing when it might be a scenario where there's 20 other sellers that are trying to price competitively, and you have to keep your margin into account? What type of approaches do you typically take there?
Well, so we don't work with any resellers. So I want to be very specific here. We only work with brands that own the actual buy box. So we live and die by the search engine ranking page on Amazon, the SERP. We don't actually help sellers compete for, at least right now, we don't help sellers compete for the buy box when you're reselling an item.
Gotcha. So what if I was a brand that might be running into buy box issues with like resellers taking over my buy box?
Like
Is that something you
so we notify. So we have a lot of Slack channel communication with all of our sellers, because we're essentially like their co-pilot. We're like a data science team that also has a software, and we're not just like letting the software run on its own, right? We're actually overseeing all the decisions. So we have the capability to like override it, but we get notified when there's a hijacker, and then we'll notify the client that there's a hijacker as well.
Awesome.
I wanted to share. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wanted to share this. I thought this could be an interesting, just to share like some interesting case studies. So this is Mina. I don't know if you know Mina. He's in the PPC space. Pretty outspoken guy. So he's a client. And so we essentially have been able to increase his average selling price by 10%, increase his profit 20%. So this is an extra $56,000 of profit this year for him. So he turned on Prophecy in May 19, 2023. And there was some, you can see profit is red and of this year, and blue is profit of last year. And so there was some pretty interesting gaps here where we're essentially helping the profit gap that we're capitalizing on. Anytime that you see the space between blue and red, right, that's the profit increases that we've made. But then suddenly our model was like, okay, let's start increasing price. So it felt that there was more demand that was happening. So by the way, this is price. So the model said, okay, let me start increasing price. So you can see it's increasing pricing here. And you can see what happens to his profit, the gap between the red and the blue. This is the profit opportunity that we capitalized on. And so it was a massive, massive, massive lift for him in his product base. Now, the same thing happened for this guy named Michael Jackness. He's a pretty outspoken, I would say, influencer in the space too. He runs Ecom Crew, but this was his brand Tehran, where he came to us and he's like, hey, I'm about to sell my company in the coming months. So we increased profit for him 12%, which increased his enterprise value. His sale of the business increased that much more by implementing what we've implemented. So you can see here, actually, we started decreasing price to sell more units, and you can see what happened to his profit here, and you can see the spread between the red and the blue. So hopefully that's pretty clear for people. I have so many other examples of this, but I thought that would be an interesting share that I don't typically present on these calls, but I thought would be interesting for people to see.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. I think it's another just signal, right? Especially that one taking into account like an upcoming sale. Like this is more of a strategic approach, right? It takes you looking at your own signals, looking at your own goals, your own issues that go to your brand, and making a strategic plan off of that. Maybe that's having a partner, maybe that's having someone on your staff, but needing to think about this strategically, and it can't just be, I'm gonna look at this one metric. I'm just going to look at my conversion rate and make all my adjustments off of that. That's probably not going to work in most scenarios. So I think it's another testament to that there. Well, cool. Well, Chad, I appreciate all the insight. It's been great to hear and learn from you. I guess as we kind of wrap up here, if you are wanting to hear more about IntentWise, learn anything else from us, feel free to reach out to me at kenton@intentwise.com, or you can reach out to the general IntentWise email. We have a help@intentwise.com if you want to learn more, or visit us online or on LinkedIn, just IntentWise, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Kenton Snyder. But Chad, if people are wanting to learn more about you, Prophecy, any more content you might have out there. I know you mentioned your email earlier. Is there anywhere else that they can get in contact from you, learn more from you?
Yeah, I'm always posting thoughts on LinkedIn and Twitter. So you can just find me at Chad Rubin on LinkedIn or Twitter. Certainly my personal email if you have questions, even outside of price. Like I've been doing this for a pretty long time, 20 years of time. So I'm an OG in the space, I guess you can say. And so I'll tell you how it is. So just feel free to reach out at Chad at Prophecy with any questions you have. I'm here to really make this community better and leave it better than how I found it.
Awesome. Well, Chad, I appreciate it. One other link we'll be throwing in the chat is for our newsletter and future webinar signups. So if you want to be kept up to date with future webinars, more content like this, we're all about education here at IntentWise. So we want to keep providing that value for you. So if you want to get more insight into that, feel free to sign up for the newsletter there. But I appreciate everyone for coming out again. Thanks, Chad, for taking the time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Yep. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for having me.